Apologies.
Yes.
Hello, Jorge. Amazing to have you on my podcast.
Yes, it's a pleasure.
And
I have seen you from the beginning. So.
we have talked a lot. You have seen me from the beginning of my podcast. When I will
Yes.
become famous, you'll be like, I've been working with this guy.
Exactly, even before the podcast, so you know.
And we have met in the Council of Europe here when we're recording this on the 28th of January. And you have been doing your organization work.
Yeah.
What has it been like? What were the main goals of your organization?
Yes, we start cooperating with members here at the Council of Europe by the end of 2023, and especially since last year, because we saw so many members of parliament interested on supporting, economic inclusion, in supporting more human rights, in supporting people from Venezuela, the cause of a free Venezuela. So
Suffering of people from Venezuela.
Of course, and people like from Venezuela, from Ukraine, we fight against the same enemy, which is autocracy, which is this relationship between Maduro, Russia, Iran, etc. So I found here a place where we can cooperate, work on these issues, also a lot of youth issues, because as you know, the Council of Europe was given this mandate by the member states, which is to include a youth perspective in all the policies, deliberations, resolutions, which I believe enhances democracy. I believe that if you incorporate the perspective of young people, you can have better policies, more representative decisions, and more forward-looking decision-making, because otherwise policies are too short-sighted and too risk-adverse.
Yeah, the point about youth is, I remember what initially got me attracted to all of this work in the organization is because I feel like many people are just disregarding the opinions that youth has nowadays, just saying, well, you gotta grow up and you'll understand everything. But some people would like to gain experience now, and they would be pleased if somebody just explained to them why this doesn't work, why this policy is not efficient, why we would like to implement something different. So I really appreciate you for doing something on youth.
And we will do way more, and you are like the first person that I will be calling, because we need young people not to just be on the sidelines or not to just be invited at events.
Not to just advisors.
Not just advising, but actually making meaningful contributions, understanding how to propose policy, how to influence policy, because ultimately all the decisions we taken today will affect us way more than anybody else. And if you have institutions in which most members are closer to retirement age, there's nothing wrong with that, to be in that age.
We don't hate on them, but we just would like to have more of people from different, it's same diversity argument that they make with race, with gender, is just with age, and many people don't understand that.
Yeah, because otherwise there is a bias towards certain kind of policies. If you have all young people not represented, and even beyond the biases, if you don't have representation of young people will feel abandoned by democracy, betrayed by democracy. And that's bad for everyone.
That's not a good feeling. There will go for all kinds of different parties.
Exactly.
Yeah, also the work you've been doing on debunking, because you've been attending a lot of organizations and conferences on economic policies who actually work directly on implementing them.
Yeah, something that we realize very fast is that there are many people who are losing their banking access at an alarming rate. And this includes regular people, let's say immigrants, small entrepreneurs, but also a lot of people involved in politics. So many people who are human rights activists or policymakers or former senior officials, heads of humanitarian organizations, they are being excluded from the financial system. Why? Because there's a series of regulations that are making life very difficult for both banks and consumers. Regulations that could be done or intended something positive for society, but what ends up happening is that they are financially excluding millions of people, and they're also imposing extreme cost and risk for the private sector. So for example, if an organization wants to deliver humanitarian aid in Ukraine, or an NGO wants to support activists in Venezuela, the amount of compliance that banks is asking this organization, it becomes a point in which it's not profitable for either the bank or the organization or anybody involved. So what will end up happening if these regulations continue, All these regulations related to anti-money laundering regulations, counter-terrorist financing laws. What will happen is that all these operations will cease to exist. Humanitarian work, human rights work, etc. What we realized is that nobody was tackling this problem, nobody was understanding, nobody was actually doing research, and we are the first one moving forward. And here at PACE, we have advised members to initiate resolutions on this issue. And here at the Council of Europe, there has been at least 4 resolutions, proposals being developed thanks to the recommendations that we have made. We have brought human rights activists, we have brought entrepreneurs to the Council of Europe, so that way these perspectives are also shared.
Well, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise, my friend.
Thank you.
And keep doing what you're doing. Keep informing, keep working really hard.
I will.
People these days are not working hard, you work hard. So I am very grateful to have
Fantastic
you as
message.
my friend.
See you.
Yeah.
Gaël, it's awesome to have you on my podcast. First of all, you're a member of the Secretariat, which, let's just explain to the viewers what exactly that means.
Sure. So thank you for inviting me. I'm staff member of the Council of Europe, more precisely of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. And in this capacity, I'm secretary to the Committee on Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons. We are a small team of 6 persons. And among this team, I'm an administrator, and I'm in charge of accompanying the parliamentarians of our assembly.
Right. So migration is the main thing, the main topic you're focusing on, which is obviously it has been flowing more than ever in social media, around news. These topics are very much brought up, regardless of which country you're from, whether that's France, which you're from France, whether that's Britain, and I've spent some time in Britain already. Do you think migration as a whole, not talking about illegal migration yet, but migration as a whole, is very beneficial to the economy of the government of the country?
I think yes. Of course, it's not a popular answer for many viewers. I guess
I do think it's popular because people on balance think it brings more benefits than drawbacks.
I will give one figure. 96% of people remain in their country around the world. So migration represents a very small part of movement of human beings on our earth. So at the end, it's not a big deal. Of course, politically speaking, it's a big deal. The electoral business of some parties, of some political groups, and it's a trend at the moment in Europe to use migration or misuse migration and people on the move for electoral purposes.
You got it right, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm afraid. Yeah, I would like to avoid such debates, but I'm afraid it's a starting point of our political agendas in many countries.
Some people do view it as, I know many parties who use that as a key point of their campaign to say, well, kick everybody out, but I don't think that's efficient from the economic standpoint.
Exactly, because migrants also represent part of our national economies. Most of them pay taxes. They do jobs that, let's say, the population do not wish to do.
Yeah.
I mean, they are also
as
here.
Bad as it sounds.
Yeah, and being part of a melting pot, not only on the cultural aspects, but also on the economical aspects. Migrants are a necessity. And I would say even more, and this week at the Parliamentary Assembly, there is a debate on demographic aging. For all democracies from the Western Europe, we are in a situation of aging population, which means that we will have problems with our pension schemes, with our economies, especially for many jobs. So we need migration at some point. At least it's one of the solutions. Immigration as one of the solutions to demographic aging. So this is a point. This is also a point, I would say, for entering the future of our generations, because it's not only about being among ourselves. If I take France, my country of origin, as an example, France knew many periods of migration, of immigration, let's say. There were the Italians, there were the Portuguese, there were people from the Maghreb countries, and nowadays, like many other neighboring countries in Europe, there are people from sub-Saharan countries, for instance. There are many people from Ukraine because of the
In
war.
France, yeah.
In France and in Europe as a whole. So this is the biggest movement of population since the Second World War. So it's also unique for Europe. It's something that we could not have imagined a few years ago. So we are in a situation where migration is on the top of the agenda, but I would say it's always on the top of the agenda. It has always been, especially in politics.
And I think globalization mostly allowed people to move, and the fact that over time our salaries actually our wages have gone up, and that people can afford to travel is a good thing. Although with that comes the question of housing in many countries. For example, with Britain, I know, as I did a podcast that basically almost the same thing now. Did a podcast with many people who are, I can say, mostly against immigration now. They will say that the big problem is housing because Britain simply does not have enough housing. And they gave some numbers saying to allow for everybody to properly live in the country, we would need to build something like 2 houses a minute or something like that, which is completely ridiculous.
I'm always cautious with the numbers and the figures, but it's true that there is a housing crisis in many of our countries. But there are also programs for that. I mean, it's the duty of any state of ensuring, let's say, enough housing for its own populations, I would say.
Okay.
Migrants are at some point part of these populations, but not a big part at the end. Migration throughout Europe and throughout Europe is divided among many countries. At the end, it's not a big deal compared to the number of our inhabitants. Coming back to housing, we have, for instance, at the Council of Europe, the Development Bank, which is a bank helping our member states, so the 46 member states, almost the whole geographical Europe, to develop housing programs for different categories of populations. And of course, it includes migrants. As soon as they have a willingness to integrate, and it's most of the case, the case, I would say, the situation, willing to work and to stay in the country, or at some point to go back to their country when the situation will be better, because most of them flee their countries because of war, persecutions, violence. It's not only for economic purposes.
Yes.
Many migrants leave their country for other imperious reasons, I would say. So there are programs, there are solutions which are not necessarily as costly as we could imagine, let's say.
It happened with Ukraine that people left the country not because they wanted to necessarily, but because many were just forced to. And I'm very grateful to countries that actually accepted a lot of immigrants from Ukraine, like Poland, France did as well, Great Britain, and a lot of people are living there. But yeah, then comes the question that whether these people are planning to go back to their countries after their stay in a foreign country. And this is very important because we have to take into account on whether to rely on those people as potential citizens, or whether they will go back and contribute to their country and perceive this new country that they live in as just the opportunity for growth and just to stay for a while.
And there are other issues, other elements to take into account for a return of populations to their homeland. This is about security. This is about job opportunities. This is not only about citizenship or stable governments. For instance, if you take the example of Ukraine and the east of Ukraine, there are now millions of landmines.
Yeah.
So once this awful war will be over, there will be the issue of a safe return of population to the east of the country. Whatever the political, geopolitical situation of the east of the country, whatever the situation, which is of course very important, but apart that, there is a question of the soils and water being polluted for decades by explosive, unexploded weapons, by landmines. And I worked on this topic with a Croatian parliamentarian last year. And it was precisely one of the mandates of our committee. It's not only about migration, but also about displaced persons. And it was precisely on the issue of the situation of people being forced to leave their homeland due to conflicts, due to war, but also the issue of a dignified, voluntary, and safe return to their homeland. And then we go back to this issue of not only job opportunities, economical reasons, or stability of the new established government, whatever, but there is also the issue of the unexploded weapons.
And whose duty is it to take care of the people who have left and now coming back? Whose duty is it to take care of their safety, of their well-being? Is it the duty of the country that has accepted them, or the country that allowed them to migrate in the first place?
No, obviously, this is the country of origin which has, let's say, a responsibility to take care of its nationals. Ukrainian people, many of them wish to return to Ukraine at some point. Even the internally displaced persons among Ukraine are probably willing to go back to their homeland on the east of the country. But of course, there are, as I said, many factors for that. And I would say some of them will probably stay abroad because they will have a new life. They will have found maybe a new partner, a new family, a new job, a kind of new stability. But I know that many of them wish to return to Ukraine. And then, of course, the Ukrainian authorities, but probably at some point with the help of neighboring countries, of the European institutions as well, will receive support to assist these families, these populations to go back at some point to their country.
And because many of the people don't actually understand what the jobs of the European Commission, European Parliament, European Council, Council of Europe are. Just to outline specifically to the topic of migration, what were the discussions that happened, how they impacted the world? Maybe there were several instances when they really made the difference, because Council of Europe, as I know, and you can correct me at any point, but as I know, it has only the advisory powers to...
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
First of all, the European Union, which is made of 27 countries, member states, adopted this pact. We heard a lot about this pact, the Pact on Migration and Asylum. All members of the EU have to translate into their national legislation such a pact. This pact is a package of 10, if I can say, laws, 10 decrees adopted by the EU institutions. Then it has to be translated into national legislation. For the 27 countries, we are here with 46 member states. So we have the 27 EU members as member state of the Council of Europe, but we have more. And we have to deal with migration issues and displacement of populations and people having the status of refugees for the whole 46 member states.
Yeah.
And then the role of the Council of Europe is both at some point binding and advisory. Binding because we have our conventions. We have 200 conventions. These are binding documents vis-à-vis our member states. Our member states joined the Council of Europe and have to abide to, they are committed to such instruments they have ratified.
So there are actually binding agreements as well?
The conventions, plus the case law of the European Court. For the rest, we have a number of reports, of recommendations, what we would call soft law, which are advisory. These are not binding documents. So it's also the job of people like me in the Secretariat of the Council of Europe, and especially at the Parliamentary Assembly, to participate in the implementation of our recommendations, in the follow-up of our documents. The point is that at some point, our member states are always closer and closer to well-functioning democratic institutions. They are close to our standard in terms of democracy, human rights, and rule of law, our 3 pillars. So it's where we make the difference with the EU. The EU, of course, the EU members are also committed vis-à-vis migration, vis-à-vis fundamental rights. But the core business of the Council of Europe and the initial regional instrument is the European Convention on Human Rights. And this is about the Council of Europe and its court in Strasbourg, the European Court, which is in charge of interpreting the convention, expanding the scope of the convention. And it's also about fundamental rights. It's also about migration issues.
So countries that enter the EU have to sign certain documents which will make them...
In fact, it was done before because all the members, all the EU members are already member states of the Council of Europe. And many members of the Council of Europe, not being EU members, have in mind joining the EU at some point in the future. They are willing, there are wishes from South Caucasus countries like Armenia, Georgia, for instance, despite Georgia now is more problematic in terms of some reforms, and some others. There is a willingness of many Balkans countries to join the EU in the future to determine, because it's a long-term process. But then the role of the Council of Europe is to prepare these countries to possibly, it's not compulsory, it's not automatic, to join the EU institutions. But their role, or let's say their commitments vis-à-vis the Council of Europe, is to, let's say, to implement in their law and in practice the conventions they have ratified here in Strasbourg.
Yeah, so convention is mandatory, everybody has to follow that. And the laws that get passed during, in the hemicycle, as we call it, hemicycle is just the main hall of,
right,
of where discussions take place. All the papers that go through that and get voted in favor, they are not mandatory. They are basically advisory, and they have to go further to the European Parliament and then European Commission, right?
It can be taken on board by the EU institutions, but primarily it's our job also to ensure the follow-up of our resolutions, because this is the term used for these documents, very political documents adopted by the Assembly, the resolutions, which are short, political, straightforward documents with a series of recommendations. And it's our job within the Council of Europe and with our different bodies, institutions within the Council of Europe to ensure the follow-up of these recommendations. For instance, I will give you one example. The recommendation, the resolution that the Assembly adopted on the unexploded weapons and the displacement of populations recommends a European consortium or the European cooperation to assist Ukraine once Ukraine will be done with this awful war, to demine, to organize demining operations in the country, which is the precondition before you can imagine any return of population to the east oblast of the east of the country. So it's one example of these recommendations. There are also recommendations like organizing training by demining authorities from other member states to Ukrainian demining authority, etc., etc. So this is a very small example, but there are many other examples of what we can advise to vis-a-vis our countries and what we have also to follow up at some point.
One of the key and perhaps last points that I want to come to is, were there once again any precise resolutions which actually got implemented and got followed on migration, which is what your focus is?
I do not have one specific example in mind, but it's which is interesting.
Was there work on migration going on throughout the years?
Well, this is a continuous job, I would say, more than a generation of a staff member, I would say. It's why the Council of Europe is still accurate after 27 years of existence. Not what I say, 75 years of existence.
Yeah, okay.
The role of the Council of Europe in terms of migration remains accurate. I will give you another example maybe to finish. It's about elections. We hear a lot about elections, about manipulations during elections. It's not only manipulations through social media, for instance. It's also, through another angle, the manipulation through some populations. We know that there are migrants being misused or being groups manipulated by some countries. We can see this, for instance, at the border between Poland and Belarus. Belarus used groups of migrants to try to interfere in the EU sphere, in the EU migration policy, tried to, let's say, destabilize the EU overall agreement
How did they do that?
stability. Well, by pushing groups of migrants to cross through the
Okay,
Polish border
okay.
and to go within not only Poland, but within EU territory. So it's where also our action is obvious and is important. You have the example of the Human Rights Commissioner from the Council of Europe, who visited the border between Belarus and Poland. So we have a number of institutions being able to invite our countries, our member states, to implement these documents, the resolutions of the Parliamentary Assembly, but also the reports by many other bodies of our organization.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have your time, and
my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Hello, George. It's super
Hello,
nice.
How are you?
Yes, super nice to have you on my podcast.
Great pleasure to be with you.
You're a member of the Constitution Committee in the House of Lords.
Yes, that's one of the main committees in the House of Lords, consisting of members of all parties, looking at the Constitution of the United Kingdom, all aspects of it, things like devolution to Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and the regions of England, the law, the legal system, every aspect of our Constitution. But we don't have a written Constitution. And that's one of the things that we are likely to be looking at in more detail. Our Constitution consists of common law, legislation that Parliament agrees, precedents, and conventions. Altogether, they construct this unwritten, uncodified Constitution. And there is a debate about whether or not it should be codified and brought together, not necessarily as a clear Constitution like the United States, but at least a more codified and coherent Constitution than the disparate structure we have at the moment.
Well, that's a good question, because in Ukraine, and I'm from Ukraine, in Ukraine we have a written constitution, a proper one. It's actually been, I think, recognized as one of the best formed constitutions. So, yeah, in my view, it's more appropriate, more comfortable for the government to have a proper set of rules that it has to follow.
I think most countries that have been formed recently, when I'm saying recently, in the last 100 or 200 years, have got constitutions. Ukraine, of course, and the United States. That was written, of course, by the founding fathers. But because the United Kingdom is such an old country, 1707, when Scotland became part of the United Kingdom, or created the United Kingdom along with England and Wales, and then Northern Ireland, and Ireland at the time, and then Northern Ireland, then Ireland separated, part of Ireland separated. So it's been hundreds of years, which is why we've got such a complicated, unwritten, uncodified constitution.
Makes sense. And so your laws are basically based on some of the previous cases. You analyze the previous cases and then base the decisions on those.
I mean, there are things like conventions and precedents, like the arrangements for proroguing Parliament or dissolving Parliament. When Boris Johnson tried to do that, which he had no right to do, it was challenged, and he had asked the Queen to prorogue Parliament, and that was challenged in the courts, and the courts ruled that it was unconstitutional. So there are circumstances where the Supreme Court in the United Kingdom can make a ruling like that. But normally Parliament is, the United Kingdom Parliament is supreme. And that's why there's a big debate at the moment about whether or not the devolved Scottish Parliament is equal to the United Kingdom Parliament. And some of the Scottish nationalists who are arguing for independence they pretend, and I mean pretend, that they've got it at the moment, and that the Scottish Parliament is equal to, on a same basis as the United Kingdom Parliament. But it isn't, because we're still a unitary state, basically, with devolved powers, unlike the United States, which is a federal state, where the powers come up from the states to the federation. We're a centralized unitary state with devolved powers, but that hasn't stopped people in Wales and Scotland, particularly, seeking more powers and looking, in some cases, towards independence. And that's a major discussion. We had a referendum in 2014, and the Scottish National Party became the largest party, and Alex Salmond, who's no longer with us, died recently, negotiated with David Cameron that there should be a referendum, and the Scottish people rejected separation.
Oh,
they didn't want independence, and they wanted to stay part of the United Kingdom.
okay. So I have spoken to one of Scottish nationalists, one of the MPs, and yeah. So you belong to the view of thinking that they shouldn't be separated.
I do. I think the United Kingdom has existed for all these years, since 1707. It's probably the most successful union. I think the European Union was very successful.
Oh, yeah.
And I was strongly against us withdrawing from the European Union.
I don't think it was.
Brexit was a terrible mistake, a disaster. But the Union of the United Kingdom is also a very strong, and probably a stronger, and it is a longer standing union. And to break it up, when we have so much in common, when we have so much trade within the United Kingdom, between Scotland and England and Wales, it would be foolish. But and also because the enemies of the United Kingdom, particularly Russia, would like to see the United Kingdom break up. They want to weaken their enemies, their countries that challenge them, and that's why I believe the Russians interfered in the Brexit referendum through posting on social media a lot of disinformation, because they wanted to break up the European Union, to weaken it, and equally they want to break up the United Kingdom to weaken it, which is every reason, in my view, why we should stick together and be as strong as possible.
Okay, so in my opinion, EU is a massive, great economic organization, yes. No doubt about it. And I just wonder, when Ukraine is trying to enter, yes. Trying so hard to enter, why would a country like the UK would be trying to leave it?
Well, I mean, one of the ironies
was it the independence claim, or that we're dependent on other, governments?
I think we were misled, and there is an irony that even some of the people who wanted the United Kingdom to leave and campaigned for the United Kingdom to leave the European Union are arguing that Ukraine should join the European Union, which is crazy.
And many other countries should join.
Absolutely. And I want Ukraine to join. I want other countries to join. And I hope that we will rejoin. It won't be in my lifetime, but I hope we will rejoin, because it is so strong, the European Union. And even though there are differences, the falsehoods that the Brexiteers put forward were that bring back control, take control. And they said that the European Union had too much control. Now, France is as powerful as the United Kingdom. And
Is it? Is it though?
Yes, and France
Oh.
still does, and Germany, and they still decide so much of their own matters, as we did. But where it was sensible and helpful for us to work together, we did that, and that's the basis of the European Union. And the French are no less French; they're as patriotic and as chauvinistic as anyone in the United Kingdom. But the other falsehood that the Brexiteers put forward was that this would release a lot of money. They had a bus with 350 million a week for the NHS. Well, that's never happened. In fact, when we left, the Conservative government reduced the funding for the NHS. So we left the European Union on a false premise. And that's still something we're looking at, the Constitution Committee. If we were examining the possibilities, as we are, of resetting our relationship with Europe, or ultimately, as we might do, rejoining the European Union, it would be the Constitution Committee that would make recommendations to the House of Lords about how it could be done and should be done.
So of course, countries like Russia, or like China, like probably India to some extent, would like to see a United Kingdom further divided.
Yes.
And regardless of whether it's the right decision or not the right decision for Scotland to be a separate country, do you think it would be possible for Scotland to be independent?
Yes, I mean, some of the nationalists say that those of us who want, who are against separation, against independence, say they are too weak, too small, and too poor. We don't say that. It would be possible for Scotland to be an independent country, like Slovakia, who moved away
from Czechoslovakia. Yeah.
Republican Czechoslovakia broke up. It would be possible, but it would have consequences, and I think we would be weaker. The pensions, the currency, there are so many question marks over that. And just as Brexit has been a disaster for the United Kingdom, Skexit, Scotland is coming out of the European.
Okay, that's a new term.
Skexit would be a disaster for Scotland, but we could do it, and it's not impossible. But the negative aspects of it are far outweigh any positive aspects that might come from it.
Okay, so as I've been doing plenty of episodes on the Council of Europe now,
yes,
introducing to people how it actually works, because not many people, I think, understand them. So hidden behind the curtains. What are your roles in there? Are you part of any specific committees, or
here in the
is there?
Council of
Yeah.
Europe?
Is there any specific work you've been doing?
I've cut down my participation in the Council of Europe because in the recent years I have had a couple of health problems. But I maintain an interest in two committees, principally the Culture, Media, Education and Sport Committee.
Oh, culture is a big one. We can debate all day long on the culture.
But I did a report on sport, on the governance of football, and made a number of recommendations about trying to limit the influence of big money in football.
Don't sell it to Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely, absolutely right. But unfortunately, in spite of our recommendations, which my recommendations were adopted by the Council of Europe, countries and football clubs are moving in the other direction. The only thing that we recommended, which has been moving in the right direction, is more gender equality, and now more women are getting involved in football. And women's football is getting good crowds in the United Kingdom and other countries of Europe. So that's been a positive thing. And I'm on the political committee. And on the political committee, the countries and the issues that I've been most interested in are Ukraine and supporting Ukraine against the illegal war that Russia has.
Still on the agenda, but
Absolutely. and Belarus, where I've become godparent for a political prisoner in Belarus. I've raised issues. Just this very week, I raised issues with our own Foreign Office, and they've made an excellent statement about the Belarus so-called election as being a sham, and they have thankfully introduced sanctions on 9 additional people from in Belarus who've been involved in that. So that's been an area that I've had particular interest in the political committee.
Okay, so in sport, regarding sport, it's interesting, right? Because some of the people who own clubs in England are not, they don't particularly have to comply with the government, so they can do whatever they want. Of course, if it's someone like Abramovich, he had to reach some kind of, had to sell his club because of the assets that the government was about to seize from him. But on others, I think it's incredibly hard to force them to do something incredibly with football, soccer, the football being such a big,
It has big money, and some of the people who are the worst in football are the agents. The agents who are multimillionaires.
They're milking clubs for money.
Absolutely, and they move top players around who shouldn't move around from their own interest point of view, just so that they the agents, can make money. And now the English Premier League, which is the richest in the world, I don't think there is one club that has a British owner, or British company or British organisation owning it. Mostly foreign ownership, either governments or individuals. I'm a supporter of a Scottish club called Heart of Midlothian. And Heart of Midlothian is the biggest fan-owned club in the United Kingdom.
What does that mean?
I helped to negotiate, along with Ian Murray, who is now the Secretary of State for Scotland. We did this about 20 years ago, about, first of all, setting up a foundation, the Foundation of Hearts. And over the years, we've got 8,500 fans who contribute every month different sums to the foundation. And that foundation has given millions of pounds.
And that works.
Wow. Club. And what happened was that a wealthy woman bought the club when it went into administration. She did it on an understanding that she would hand over the ownership to the foundation, and she's now done that. And the foundation has got 2 representatives on the board. She's still on the board. And the foundation, consisting of these 8,500 members, has the main percentage ownership of the club.
One of the last, perhaps, questions that I would like to come to, the big, you mentioned it, and I think it's right, one of the biggest issues now that the Council of Europe thinks they need to tackle is gender equality.
Yes.
But I think with football particularly, and I don't know, we didn't plan this discussion to go into football, but it went naturally.
Yeah.
So with football, I think, and especially women football, I don't think it should be compared to men as in gender equality under this narrative, because it's a separate thing. Men football has been evolving for so many years, and of course it's going to get much more attention. Of course people are watching it much more, and it doesn't make sense to pay people the same while this generates billions and this generates few hundred millions. But we need to help this football to grow.
Absolutely. I'm not saying it should be equal, exactly the same. What I'm saying is that there should be equal opportunity.
Yeah, I get that.
That's what we did. Because up until a few decades ago, I've forgotten the exact date, it was, women were forbidden to play football. in the United Kingdom. That's astonishing, isn't it?
Well, that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
And people who would like to watch women football, because I think they might be progressing in this, in their skills, they should absolutely be allowed to watch this. And yeah, I think it's an amazing...
It's equal opportunity. The Labour Party, my party, is often criticised by the opposition in the United Kingdom as being wanting to bring down the level of people to a certain level, take away the money from rich people. We're not. We want to give everyone the opportunity to become, to own their own homes, to do good jobs, to become less poor, richer, perhaps you could call it. But it gives them that opportunity to do that. But we don't have in Britain at the moment the circumstances in which everyone has equal opportunity. Some people go to private schools and benefit. Other people have inheritance from, in the House of Lords. We still, believe it or not, have hereditary members who've inherited the titles and the place on the legislature from the parents, from the grandparents and great-grandparents. That has to change. And we're in the process of changing that. Going back to the Constitution, where we started, one of the things we're doing now is getting rid of hereditary peers, members of the House of Lords.
Well, I think it's a great point to stop our discussions on. Thank you so much.
We've gone
Thank
right
you for
in
your
a
time.
circle, and back to where we are.
Thank you for your
Thank you
time.
very much.